One thing real quick here in the chat, and we'll kind of get started in a bit. That's funny. So you guys been watching that whole thing, huh? Not like it was a problem, obviously, but it's good to know Tony. He's a good dude. Yeah, not much. That's why I don't run for office. There's too many things that I don't want to talk about. About my eBay, yeah. My eBay is kind of a little scary. The things that I bought. So wait, did we all see this? This is my favorite social distancing COVID supply of all time. Best 20 bucks I've ever spent on eBay. So it's a little scary. I haven't walked into a store with it yet, but be that guy. Yeah, thank God it's not a Mop 4. That is way. So for those of you who don't know what Mop 4 is, it's worth a Google. It is by far, anyone who's been in the military, it's their nightmare scenario of having to wear a mask. And it is brutal because if you're in it and you're using it, it is saving your life. This, however, is a Czechoslovakian surplus mask, which is mostly a joke. So I don't have to wear it for hours and hours on end. So I've booked for about 45 minutes here. I've got probably 35 minutes worth of material, so we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. I'm just putting in the chat now to leave any questions you might have in there. We'll try and get to them, but obviously feel free to jump back in there. But yeah, we're going to have some fun with it and talk about some different stuff, so give it a few more minutes. So Cassandra, what branch were you in out of curiosity? Anyone who knows what Mop 4 is and spells it correctly served at some point. So, there you go, Air Force. I was told by the Air Force that I was too dependent. That's awesome. Yeah, I was told by the Air Force I was too large for military service. So the height weight chart, right, goes like this. And as a former defensive lineman, I haven't been that size since I think sophomore year in high school. And it was kind of comical. So I missed my opportunity, but you know, I've got a lot of friends that are still in and are vets and things like that. So it's been fun to speak the language without being too weird. So and they definitely didn't expect me to take a civilian SEER class a while back either. So one of those guys. But the dependent comment is priceless. That's well played. So all right, got about another minute or two. Won't hang out too much longer here and do the dance. Just want to make sure people can figure out their way on the platform and all that kind of stuff, but we'll talk about Designing Like a 5-Year-Old, which is a interesting title. So I'm glad to see that people actually were interested in it. So we'll kick it off here shortly. Actually, you know what? We'll just do it. So I'm going to share my full screen for me so I can do the presentation. I don't know if I will be able to actually see anything in real time. So that may help because I'll do what I've been doing, which is reading everything there and getting things discombobulated. So we'll go ahead and kick it off. And then, like I said in the chat, we'll have probably 10 minutes towards the end for questions and all that, but I'll go ahead and kick it off and we'll kind of go through there. So this is Designing Like a 5-Year-Old, the value of asking why when you hit a feedback wall. So my name is Justin Trowbridge. I am the Business Development Officer for Contemporary Analysis, as well as its subsidiaries, which is, we have a couple at this point, but the big one for us right now that's relevant to this is going to be our hemp batch tracker solution. So we're in the hemp space as well. We've got over 20 years in sales and marketing, done all kinds of different things, a financial advisor at one point, sold cars, internet sales manager to dealership, things like that, securities, all kinds of stuff. So for a full list, if you want, you're more than welcome to find my LinkedIn, just J Trowbridge, and we'll kind of go from there. But the biggest thing for designers nowadays is it's a nightmare, right? The designer's nightmare is you're designing a solution with feedback from somebody that doesn't always make sense. So your end user or the people that are providing information back towards you may or may not make any sense to what you're actually talking about. And that's the real challenge because People learn in different ways, but the way that we learn as kids, which is kind of why the topic was listed this way, is when you're a child, if you're a parent, you know this, we ask why, right? Well, why? And that's how you gain information as a child, because you don't know any different, right? But it's still a fundamental thing in terms of how adults learn and how designers should learn, for that matter. So a good quote here is from Henry Ford. So he once said, if it asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. And I bring that up because this is an instance where here's somebody who designed a solution, which is the car, as we all know, is a huge monumental piece of technology and advancement for humankind. He designed the car and he forced it onto the market, because had the market told him what they wanted, they would have just done things with horses. So here's an instance where somebody developed a solution and pushed it and forced it into mainstream use and access of people that then became what we know as the automobile industry for the billions and trillions of dollars that it's worth. At the same time, the other kind of way to look at it, this is a quote from Brian Fantana. They've done studies, 60% of the time, it works every time. So obviously it's an Anchorman quote and it's a little bit funny. If you don't know me by now, I have fun with things like that. I like working in little jokes. But the reality of this is when he said this in the movie, if you've seen the movie, it was a confidence thing, right? He said it very confidently. He said it very assertively, which to the people that didn't know any better were like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And people, the social nuance of someone nodding their head, if I continue to do this, even though you're at home and I can't see you, there are people right now that are nodding their head because it is socially awkward to let somebody bob their head and not bob back. And you're still fighting it right now. Mind control, mind freak. But that's kind of what we're talking about, right? Is you're either confidently pushing it through or you're finding it. So this is what we typically look at with user feedback groups, right? So it's objective driven. It's a manager, it's a VP, it's a product development specialist, it's a customer, a client, it's any number of things, but they have an objective. I need this done by next Tuesday. I need this to do this. I need this or this, and it's a checkbox person, right? So they need to get that next hurdle through the system, and that's one kind of feedback that you're going to get. Another one is a very tech-savvy group, right? They're the people that understand technology. They're typically people that are also in the industry or have been in the industry. They understand technology at a deeper level than your average person. They're going to give you a different kind of feedback altogether because they're looking at it from a different point of view, which is always exciting, and it's always cool to hear that, but sometimes it can be counterproductive. The next one are the technologically challenged people. I love this photograph because I'm pretty sure that could be my mom at some point. But they're people that don't understand technology. They're the people that don't understand how Google works or how a phone might work or things like that. They just don't have the fundamental grasp of what technology is. So when you ask them questions about designing a technology, the feedback they give you doesn't necessarily connect reality to what actually is possible. The next one is going to be people that are blissfully unaware. So these are the people that, and I do on a horse mask, by the way, it's hilarious. But if you look at people like this, they're the people that don't necessarily understand the complexity to what you're designing. So these are the people who say, well, Facebook does it. Of course, Facebook does it. They spent millions, if not billions of dollars developing this platform. It's not something that a startup can integrate into their product day one. So it's something where these are people that just don't have any connectivity to what actually goes into the back end of these solutions that people are building and designing. The other side of this, and this can come from any one of these groups, is unrealistic or oversimplification, right? So this is the person that understands the concept to a certain degree and then oversimplifies it to the point where it is completely alien to what we're originally talking about. Going back to the car, well, it's a car, it's got 4 wheels, so if you add a 5th one, it's faster. No basis in reality or physics or engineering or anything like that, but their oversimplification of 4 wheels, 5 means it's better, can throw back some different feedback loops and cause some problems. So one of my favorite examples of this is the aircraft gripe sheet. So this is something that came out years ago through the beauty of social media and Facebook, things like that, where airlines and aircraft pilots and ground crews need to communicate. The problem is that someone might take off from Omaha and end up in Detroit or LA or Madrid or somewhere like that. So they need a way to convey problems with the airframe or concerns or like that to a ground crew that may be different every time that plane touches down. So they created what they call the gripe sheet. And some of the things are very obvious, right? So this happened, aileron, whatever. But this kind of walks through some of the cherry-picked good moments that have come out of these gripe sheets over the years. So a pilot said something loose in the cockpit. Okay, nice and ambiguous. Sounds like feedback someone would probably get for designing some solutions we're talking about. The ground crew came back with tightened something in the cockpit. It's pretty vague. It's pretty open. Any number of things could actually be loose in a cockpit, but without that specificity, there's a good word to say early in the morning, there's no way that you can do anything about that to fix it. Another good one is friction locks cause throttle levers to stick. Okay. Ground crew came back with that's what they're for. Well, a friction lock is designed to frictionally lock something in place, which makes things stick. So here's a situation where a pilot didn't understand the functionality of why it does that. They may have overlooked the actual naming of that particular device. Or frankly, they could have just been trolling the ground crew because they know that this kind of banter goes back and forth. But without a fundamental understanding of what that mechanism does, you're kind of stuck with a loop. Pilot said, test flight okay, except auto land very rough. Okay, fair assessment. Ground crew came back with auto land not installed in this aircraft. So this is an instance where a pilot may or may not have been in a more advanced aircraft and gone to a lesser advanced one, different models, different makes, different whatever. But their fundamental understanding of how that airframe is supposed to fly, it was supposed to, in their mind, have an auto land feature. They didn't see it, so they just assumed it was broken. So a good feedback for that one. So the pilot says the IFF, or identify friend or foe, is an operative, right? That's a pretty important thing to have in an aircraft, especially if you're in something that's in a combat role. IFF, always an operative when in off mode. So here's somebody that took time out of their day to tell somebody that the IFF wasn't working right, it's broken. In reality, they forgot to turn it on. So yet another interesting feedback loop. Here's a good one as well. The target radar hums, right? Well, we reprogrammed the radar with lyrics. There is something about that particular item that has to hum. It's part of the technology. It's part of the way it goes. But this pilot was trying to give feedback to the ground crew to help fix potential problem, right? They had hopefully some good intentions, but in reality, they gave a meaningless feedback that doesn't have anything to do with it. So the ground crew had a funny response. One of my favorite ones, and the last one of these we'll cover, is there's a mouse in the cockpit, right? Pretty big problem, something you don't want to have to deal with. So the ground crew came back with cat installed. A mouse running around in a cockpit in an aircraft is definitely not something you want. But for a ground crew that might have to turn around an aircraft in 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours overnight, finding a mouse in the hundreds of miles of cable and ducting and all that kind of stuff, next to impossible. So all you can really do is try and mitigate that. So that's one of those things. But when you look at the anatomy of an interrogative, or when you look at how you ask people questions, right? People are giving you feedback. When you ask people for that feedback, the first answer is usually surface value. So, and I'm pretty sure as I look at this, the stock photography, this is the guy with the beard is from The Matrix. I think it's that dude. Anyway, the first answer is usually surface value, right? So it's, how are you feeling today? Fine. It doesn't tell you anything about the person, but it's a very surface value walkthrough of what that is. Well, when you ask that same question again, and you ask why, or you dive deeper into it, the second answer usually is any residual value that's left over, right? So how do you feel? I feel fine. Well, why do you feel fine? I didn't get a whole lot of sleep last night, but I feel okay. You start to unravel that piece, that you start to see more detail about what's going on in that person's head. The third answer to a question has more thought, right? So covered the first two, like, well, why didn't you get a whole lot of sleep last night? I'm stressed at work. I'm not sleeping as well as I thought I would lately. And it's just been tough to get on a sleep cycle because I'm working from home and COVID. And, The kids are going back to school. I mean, you get a little bit more thought into that. You get a little deeper understanding of why that person is what they are. The fourth answer is truly introspective. Well, why do you think you're stressed out at work? You know, it's tough because we have these two big clients that are chewing up a lot of our time, and we're trying to figure out the best way to. So you get really deep into understanding why that person has that feeling or that input. And here's my favorite one. The fifth one is usually annoyed. If you go too far into why, you will annoy people. And this is what kids typically do, which is for parents watching this. Why? Like, oh my God, please go ask your father, go ask your mother, you know, whatever the case may be. But that fifth question of why is usually like, what are you getting at? Why are you asking me all this? It crosses that line. But you definitely understand a deeper fundamental understanding of a person when you dig into that by asking why. So we're going to go through a case study on how this worked, and we'll get a little backstory here. But the hemp industry is where we're going to go. So Contemporary Analysis, we have a couple different subsidiaries. One of them is Hemp Batch Tracker, which is a hemp tracking solution. So real quick, because I know it's hemp and people get questions, but hemp is definitely a growing industry, pun intended. But hemp was made federally legal with the 2018 Farm Bill. To qualify hemp, just so everybody knows, hemp is 0.3% THC, or the active ingredient, which is in cannabis and marijuana, which is what gets you high. So hemp is at 0.3% or less. Any of the medicinal recreational use of cannabis in the industry that you'll see, like Colorado, Oregon, California, that's going to be 20% THC or higher. So there's a huge gap between these two plants, and the differences in how you use them are significant. But right now, as it sits, 50 state legality for growing hemp, but there are guidelines. So the growing pains with hemp, right? Hemp and cannabis are similar, but they're fundamentally different. They both look the same. They both smell the same. A drug dog can't tell the difference. They are chemically different, though. That is the independent little section towards the bottom there that makes a difference. But you know, this looks like a marijuana leaf on the right here, but that's actually a hemp leaf from a CBD farm. But it's unprecedented, right? Nowhere else in our history has there been a change of legality. So we have nothing to compare it to. Even alcohol. Alcohol was legal. We did prohibition. We went back to selling alcohol. There has been no other plant that has gone from being completely illegal to it's legal, but then back, you know, to what it is now. The irony is that a lot of hemp that was produced, and if you're in Nebraska, any of the hemp that you see on rail lines or on fields or sides of the road was actually planted by the USDA as part of the war effort, because you can use hemp to create rope. So all the battleships and things like that were tied up with hemp rope. Cannabis, also known as marijuana, is a white market, black market problem. So in Colorado, if you grow marijuana, you have a white market outlet for it where it's taxed, it's monitored, there are industry standards, there are things like that. But if you take that same marijuana and you cross into Nebraska, it is currently illegal, which makes it a black market product. So that is a challenge faced by the cannabis industry, not so much in hemp, because if you are selling hemp and representing it as marijuana, you are the dumbest drug dealer on the planet, because nobody's going to get high smoking your product, which is the whole point of being a drug dealer. So with hemp even being federally legal, it's still governed by state lawmakers, right? Which is a challenge, because each state has different ways of doing it. There's different legalities. There's different problems that they face. So there's no one size fits all. And the last one is law enforcement confusion on hemp versus cannabis. If you pull over a truck and it's full of green leafy substance that smells like marijuana, law enforcement has to assume that's marijuana, because you can't just go, oh, it's hemp, no problem. They have to know that it's cannabis or hemp, and they do what they need to do beyond that. So the solution that everyone thought, because cannabis had been legal in Colorado for a couple of years and Oregon, things like that, they have cannabis tracking systems, and those are inventory control systems. So someone designed a system specifically designed to prevent black market of product, which is perfect. It's what you need for cannabis. So the inventory control model that was already in place, right? This is the faster horse. It was mandated by the states. So if you grow cannabis in Montana or Colorado, you have to use an inventory control model, because they do not want that to just be an unregulated industry. So most states will use RFID tags or radio frequency ID tags to identify each individual plant. They want to know where that plant is through its life cycle, all the way from the moment it's planted all the way through to the consumer. Those tags are typically not reusable. Everything must be accounted for. So if I grow a kilo here, I put a kilo into a dispensary, the kilo has to go out this way. As soon as there's an ounce or a gram or whatever measurement there is that goes missing, that means that there is now a black market product, and that is a problem. There is definitely a big brother feeling. So as these grow houses have thousands of plants and all that, people will go through with an RFID scanner and scan each test all the time to check for compliance, to make sure everything is good to go. But it is definitely a looming fear over the back of these people that are growing it. And it is deliberately obtuse. So it's something where the people that are growing this product, they aren't, you don't want people just jumping into it, right? They want people to go into it knowing what's going on, knowing the regulations, knowing how to do things the right way. So cannabis versus hemp, the industry standard doesn't fit hemp. So this may look like a marijuana grow. This is actually a hemp grow that we have. One of our farmers is out in Ogallala, Nebraska. But the model that exists, the faster horse, going back to the Henry Ford quote, doesn't fit the new industry. So that's where we came in, contemporary analysis. We stepped in. This is Nate at HDC last year. But we had a previous client we'd worked with, and we built a recall-based platform for a client. It was in the food industry. They were able to then recall product all the way back. And in that process, we retain the intellectual property. So we own that technology as part of what we do, and we have full rights to it and all that good stuff. We saw a need for a data recall in the hemp space with no incumbent. So there was actually an instance down in Mississippi where somebody had put fentanyl in CBD and ended up killing 6 people. So the state of Mississippi just had a moment from the Eddie Murphy movie a long time ago, Life. State of Mississippi, but they did a recall of everything that was CBD because they couldn't identify if it was one particular box or a crate or a pallet or a truck or the entire statewide supply. So they just pulled everything out. We built a V1 and we designed it with the direct end user feedback. So when we built the first version of it for the food industry, we worked with them hand in hand, and they were basically our partner in that solution to do that. And they gave us real-time feedback. So we decided, well, why not do the same thing, but for hemp? So when you look at taking what already exists, right? So you take the horse model and you try and apply it to the automobile model. The regulations are totally different. So the two platforms that exist, or the platform that existed, when you try to force fit it into hemp, it's like a square peg in a round hole. It doesn't work. Regulations totally different. So it's the Pulse scenario. You have more end uses for hemp than you do for cannabis. So you have fiber, you have grain, you have CBD, you have CBG, Delta-8, there's smokable flower, there's the herd, there's all kinds of different things that come out of it. So when everyone in the cannabis space is growing for hemp flower, or for cannabis flower to smoke or to put into edibles and gummies, things like that, they're not going in the non-consumable side of it. There's no black market for hemp. We talked about it before, but if somebody were to push hemp as cannabis, it's a self-solving problem because you are the dumbest drug dealer in the world. The measurements are different. So cannabis measures things in grams and kilos. Hemp farmers will measure it in tons and truckloads, which is a completely different volumetric problem for what the industry sees. So we've seen instances where people are using cannabis tracking stuff and they're having to convert kilos into tons or grams into tons, which is just, it's a math exercise, not a problem, but it's definitely something that adds a layer to the onion. And then RFID tags no longer make sense. So if you're growing hemp for fiber, you might have 4 million plants in a field. To put a tag on each individual plant is not going to happen. So the model didn't fit anymore. The faster horse concept was totally out of the arrangement. So here's the difficult conversation that we had with people. And I'll pre-apologize if anyone's offended by the middle finger there, but we're all adults, and I thought it was funny. So we would go to people as we're building out our hemp solution, and we would talk to people that are in the cannabis space or in the lab space or the genetic space, like, why do you track your product? And the answer we got back was very gruff, because I have to. They didn't like it. They didn't want to do it. They had to. So why don't you like your current tracking solution, right? This is the second why. Well, I don't like it because I'm forced to do it by the state, and it's kind of expensive, and I don't like it, right? So again, they sloughed off the first one with I hate it. Now they're talking about why they hate it. So why is it so difficult to execute then? That's the third question. So it's that why, right? And they came back with, well, I have to put these damn tags on every single plant. I have to scan them all the time. I have to put all the data into the computer. I have to update all the information. It takes a lot to execute, and it's time consuming. Why does that take time? And that's what really kind of got us into understanding it, is because the data entry side of it is one component, but going out and actually putting the tags on the plants, making sure those tags are there, making sure that they're in the right place, making sure that the data flow is there. And sometimes the answers that came out of this were because the order in which I put in the data didn't make sense. It was, fill out a form, but the form applied to a linear process where it was here, it was there. It was different, right? So the obstacle finally hit us, and that's where we got it. So this is Fort George. This is in Scotland. This is the ancestral home of the Royal Regiment of Scotland, the Black Watch. This fort in like 17 or 1800 cost like $2 billion, some ridiculous amount in that era money. They never used this to defend anything, but can you imagine being somebody coming from the left side of this photo, coming through what basically is a large maze designed to slow you down, to seeing this? If you saw this and you hit this as a feedback loop, you'd probably give up if you weren't already shot by the cannons and the other things that are there. And this little thing on the left here is actually a rifle or a musket installment, so you can shoot at people. It was insane. But that's a significant hurdle, and that's where a lot of people give up, and they can't figure out how to get through that solution. So back to the reason why we're talking about this. It's why. So you have to ask people why, and you get the response. Every kid that's ever, you said, well, that's just the way it is. Why? Why is it like that? The other way to think about it too is when you're designing with feedback, put yourself in the shoes of a therapist. For those of you who've never been to a therapist, there's no stigma attached to it. There's no problems with it. It's a very healthy thing to do when you need it, right? But a therapist knows what questions to ask. That's part of being a licensed therapist. You're trained in how to uncover needs and uncover things. So they know what questions to ask. The responses of the person going through therapy will guide that conversation. So if somebody says, I can't sleep, the therapist then intuitively dives into that with, well, why can't you sleep? And why is this? And you leave the questions open-ended so that people can then further the understanding of that response. The important items get a deep dive, right? So if somebody says something that is absolutely, a monumental part of their therapy, you dive into that deeper and you understand that. The things like, I feel kind of cruddy today. You don't need to deep dive into that. There's more to that. There's subcontext to that, but those kind of things. And everything is related to some degree. So I'm really tired. Why are you tired? Well, I can't sleep at night. Well, why can't you sleep at night? Well, I'm really preoccupied with this. Why are you preoccupied with that? Well, I think it stems from when I was a child and I was afraid of failing. If you just leave that top layer there, it's one thing. But if you deep dive and go all the way back through that chain, you'll see at the very beginning that there's something that caused that. There's causality to it. And it's an ongoing process, right? So when you're looking at designing something, especially when you have a feedback loop and you have people there, you can't just one and done. You have to continually go back to the well and get more and more feedback. So getting back into the hemp situation, right? The hemp grower feedback we got was they didn't know what they want. They didn't know what they needed. They're like, I don't know. I'm just growing hemp, right? This is Mark Hargan, who's one of our farmers. Mark is one of the funniest people I've ever met. Solid guy. I really appreciate everything he's done for us. But he's like, I don't know what to do. Like, we were shocked that his phone actually had the ability to take text messages and things because he's just that guy. But technology isn't a driver for this, right? It's I got to figure out how to grow this plant and be compliant. I got to figure out how to grow things so it's under the 0.3 THC. I got to figure out how to grow this and make money on it. The technology wasn't a leading edge thing that they were thinking of. So when we told them we were building something in technology, like, why? They didn't understand it. As we began to build out our data set and the things that we do with that solution, the data began to link peripherals. So we started seeing other verticals reach out to us, or we could reach out to those verticals and say, hey, we have data that can do this. What do you guys think of that? And it was mind blowing for some of them that somebody could actually provide that. The industry started coming to us with data needs. We had companies reach out directly to us to talk about how they could integrate with our platform, or how they could work with data, or how they could participate with what we're doing, or how we can help them become GMP compliant or something like that. It really was cool to see that transition of like, hey, here's something you don't know that you need yet, to, oh my God, this is exactly what I've been waiting for. And the reason we got there is because we listened to people, and we did the deep dives, and we asked why, when other people might have just moved on. So when you're dealing with the feedback loop, it's important to engage people in conversations, right? You want to do a conversation because you can engage and you can read that person's feedback, right? If it's just done in a form, there's no human being in that. There is one in the equation, but you need to get that, to hear someone be verbally affected and angry at a response. You don't have to be an empath to understand that. You can understand that if someone's angry and they go, I really hate this, then you can understand that that's there, and that's where having a true conversation comes into value. You should always be building towards an MVP, or a minimum viable product, right? Building towards that first tier, knowing that there's additional feedback that is coming that you haven't got yet, allows you to design a solution that will have more acceptability and more connectivity across all of the levels. Finding beta users who understand they're part of the design process. This has been instrumental for us, because when most people think of beta users, like, yep, I'm going to build it, you're going to play with it, and then we're going to fix it. Well, we've actually got to the point where we introduce beta users before a segment is built out. And we do that intentionally because we want them to be involved in the process, so that we are more lean in our development strategy. Instead of building everything and then going, oh, well, that doesn't work, and then tearing it down halfway and then rebuilding it, while we're lucky enough that we're in a space where what we're developing has the flexibility to build the airplane while you're flying it. Having beta users that are in there is perfect, because they understand that it's not done yet. So they also give you leeway when the demo doesn't work, or when that feature doesn't turn on the way it's supposed to, or whatever. They understand that they are inside the machine and building it with you at the same time, which is awesome. But you'll always have that push-pull cycle of needing it versus wanting it, right? And that's, again, another point where you get into the why, right? I need this. Why do you need that? Well, because I think it's cool. Why do you think it's cool? Well, because my friend Dave at this other company has it, and it's really cool with what they do. Why does Dave need that? Well, Dave is in a different industry doing different things, and so it becomes a want versus a need, but understanding that allows somebody to move that cycle forward. And definitely don't be afraid to push something out to a version 2 or version 3 or version 17. The number of times we've had meetings and talked about features or a way to roll things out, and someone said, oh, it's totally do this. I'm like, okay, that's probably a version 4 thing. We're going to focus on that, but in version 4. Doing that lets people know that they've been heard and that it's registered as a good idea, but it's not something you're going to focus on and burn a bunch of time fixing it right there. So the other side of this is building the right team. So this is one of my favorite things here, and I apologize for the fireworks and all that. Sometimes you just got to use the goofy settings that are in these presentation tools, but involve people with different backgrounds. So at this table, you have a data scientist over 20 years, sales and marketing guy, myself, over 20 years. You have a geologist. You have a cannabis producer from the state of Minnesota. You have a genetics, hemp and cannabis producer from Colorado. You have a guy that is raising Wagyu beef. But everybody at this table, we came from completely different backgrounds, and the inputs that we got and the insights we got from all those different viewpoints have helped us tremendously in understanding what we need to build for our end user base. But team building is huge, right? Especially when you get different people. I've recognized really in my career that I'm a pretty outgoing personality. So when I meet somebody who may be a bit of an introvert, I need to make sure that I'm not forcing a fit. I'm like, hey, why won't you be my friend? That thing, it exists, but it's important that that person feel comfortable coming to me with a question or a comment or a concern or whatever. So in team building, it's more than just, going to the bar or going to a paintball tournament or something like that. That's fun. It's important. But really working on your interconnectivity with your team is important because you get the right feedback down the line from your team. A big one is the what is often different than the how. So we find this a lot too with industries that are siloed and teams that are siloed, management teams, C-suite, however you want to view it. What you're trying to do will always drive how you get there. If you focus on how you're going to get there, your what is dictated, and it can be completely different than what you're actually trying to set out. So by focusing on the what and not so much on the how, treat it like water reaching the ocean. Water will always get to the ocean, just a question of how it gets there. And that how is up for debate. There's no such thing as a bad idea, right? So coming from a creative background, I've been in brainstorming sessions that have gone completely off the tracks, and the ideas are comical because we got on a funny vein. But you go back and look at it 20 minutes later, like, wait a minute, if I do these 2 or 3 things and combine them into an actual idea, that's a pretty cool idea. So no bad ideas. Definitely make it a safe space and let people put out whatever they want. Those are important because sometimes a bad idea or just someone being a goofball or being a troll, whatever they want to do, can lead to some really innovative stuff. Have a board to put ideas. So if you've ever been to our office, Contemporary Analysis, we have dry erase boards in every single room. And we do that intentionally because there are moments where we'll be talking to each other about, hey, we're going to go get lunch. And the response isn't we should go here. It's, oh my God, here's 3 things that we should do to do this project, or this is how we can solve this. And so to grab a dry erase marker and write on a board right away and put that up somewhere for filing it away somewhere else has been really helpful. Prioritizing ideas is another good one. So as you get feedback, as you start understanding that and you start looking through the whys, putting the idea towards the top of the heap that makes the most sense is perfect, right? Because you can tackle the big picture items, but understanding that there may be an idea that's 5 or 6 down the list, that's worth understanding up front, so you're not putting the cart before the horse. Last but not least, I think anyway, maybe one more on the slide, but extreme vetting of ideas. So this is an interesting way to do things from a design standpoint, but it involves basically the playing devil's advocate to an extreme. So as we would put forth ideas on how to do things, we then took the tact of how do you blow this idea up? And you start poking holes in it or trying to poke holes in it. And honestly, if one person out of your team is the defender of that idea and everyone else is trying to attack it, if you go 2 or 3 shots, you're like, I don't know, I give up. It's a pretty defendable idea. But if you can just keep coming back and just cutting away and cutting away and cutting away and cutting away, the idea isn't very strong and it needs more refinement and more activity. So really being exuberant about getting after that for the vetting of that idea has been pretty valuable to us. Having a wouldn't it be nice category, right? So this is I got an idea that's cool and all, but it's a little outside of what we're doing. Let's put it over here in the wouldn't it be nice category. When you put something in that category, what'll happen is down the line, you will find someone else will say that. Wouldn't it be nice if it did this? Or wouldn't it be cool if it did this? Or this? Or that? And you'll start seeing it pop up again and again and again. And you'll be able to realize that you're building towards that. A wouldn't it be nice is becoming a necessity. And the more times you go back to put that on the board, the more you realize that, all right, maybe we're at a point in the design process that wouldn't it be nice becomes we should be building this. So the results of what we've done with Hemp Batch Tracker, which is the name of the company for the hemp tracking. So we're the possible default on for hemp tracking in 4 different states and 1 potentially for medical marijuana. Since I developed this, I found out yesterday that is not the case anymore. They've gone with a different company, but it was definitely in conversations to be a tracking solution for medical marijuana because they focused on the recall, not the inventory control. We've worked with 2 different labs for testing for potency for hemp. to become a LIMS software, so Lab Inventory Management System, which is right now everyone's using big pharma LIMS software, which doesn't fit the hemp model. It does and it doesn't. But we are potentially becoming the first hemp-specific LIMS software for the industry, which would be huge because we'd be the only ones in that space. We realized along the way that we are a tool for GMP and GAP compliance, so good manufacturing process, good agricultural process, which is all just record keeping, right? We accidentally built a GMP, GAP compliance tool. But because we listened to feedback and what people were wanting and looking for, we realized we had that opportunity, which has opened up a whole different client base for us for people that are moving forward with that. We're also working with a company that is a transportation company. Let's be vague about it, but we all know what it is, to put hemp on rail cars. Because it's an emerging industry, people don't connect the dots that you can put hemp in a train and move it across the country. It is, it's alien to them. So, and when we reached out to this company, they're like, oh yeah, I guess we could move that because it's legal, right? And so they've had to learn from us. We've had to learn from them. And we're now talking about moving hundreds of tons, if not thousands of tons of hemp interstate on rail lines, which is unprecedented for the industry. We've become an industry expert for data in the hemp field. So we get a lot of interesting questions on what kind of data should I be collecting? How should I do this? Which is nice because it's put us to the forefront and we get a lot of good visibility from that. So here's a great quote. A lot of people fail because they're too busy finding problems. Those who succeed are busy finding solutions. It's one of my favorite authors. I don't know if that rings a bell or anyone, but that's something I just said for the end of this slideshow here to be a little funny. But that's really all I have on why you should design like a 5-year-old. Hopefully it's not too much of a misnomer. I'll jump back into the chat here to see if there's any questions, but here's my definite contact information, which I'll share in the chat as well. But you can also reach out to me through LinkedIn, but let me see if I can do this without crashing the whole thing. Ooh, there we go. So lots and lots of good things here. Uh-oh, we've got all kinds of fun stuff. Holy cow. Tony's been at it. Thank you, Tony. Thanks, Paul. We appreciate it. Yeah, the feedback loop is definitely something where it's been a lot of fun. Let me close this out. It's been a lot of fun to talk to people that have a passion. When you're developing something, nothing worse than having somebody that's kind of the wet toast personality. But when you have people that are passionate about what they're doing, it's been a lot of fun. So we've had a good time doing it. So the question that I'll read here from Paul is if you get people in your why session that are more hostile to change, which is a very legitimate concern. When people are hostile to change, as weird as this sounds, it's disarming to ask them, why are you hostile to change? It takes some guts to ask that, but it is a question that is truly acceptable. Hey, why are you so hostile towards this idea? Or why is this difficult for you? You have to ask it with some empathy. You can't just go, why are you hostile? You have to go the opposite direction. But when somebody is pushing back an idea or trying to be abstinent against the way you do things, asking them why, and being prepared to be lit up with some fire comments, that's part of that process. Why is this difficult for you? Or why is this angry for you? And people will tell you. It's like Yelp. More people will complain about something than they will compliment something. So if you ever find somebody who's angry or obstinate about something, you will get lots of good feedback. You just have to work on maintaining that and coming at it from an earnest space, right? So I want to understand why you're upset with this. And that's a great way to do it because they understand that they shouldn't have killed a messenger. They should do something else. So hopefully that answers that question for you, Paul. But yeah, it's been interesting to see the different ways of doing it. I think part of the reason why I got into it was having been a bouncer at one point. So asking people, why does your ID look terrible? Helps quite a bit. But so for those of you that are still in the chat here, obviously, if you've got questions, go ahead and pop them up in the chat here. We've got a few minutes left, 5 minutes left here, so I'll kind of keep going through different things and have a little fun with it. But we've also looked at turning our intellectual property for the tracking solution into a couple different industries as well. We're looking at doing something with oyster culture. There you go. So we look at growing oysters. So we're tracking the cultivation of oysters. So the other areas of industry that you can take advantage of this service with asking why, I think it goes across the spectrum, right? You can go into anything. Truthfully, it was a sales technique that was taught to me years ago with trying to find the need. So the deeper you understand it, the better it is. So Gregory's got one here real quick. It's what kind of tech are we using for the tracking system? The technology behind it is multifaceted, of course. Basically, we use a SQL database, and then we use some off-the-shelf platforms to kind of help formulate it. That way, it's a data-heavy solution up front, because in the environment we're doing the tracking, the linkage of the data itself needs to be more robust than it does to look pretty, which I know sounds difficult from a design standpoint. But as we get feedback, we need the ability to be agile and change and adapt and add data points, things like that. So with any of these solutions we built, by building them data heavy, we can change those around, and then the front end reporting and the look and all that will come in a V2, and it's been pretty good. So let's see here. So there's so many more here. So let's see. So Blake, how do you help someone realize that what they want is a want and not a need? It's something where people don't expect brutal honesty. Letting them know that, hey, this is what it needs to work, and this would be the heated and air conditioned seats. It'd be really nice to have it, and I understand why you want it. There's a tool that I picked up in sales that's called AIM, which is ironic that it's the AIM conference here, but it's acknowledge, ignore, and move on. It sounds horrible to say it that way, but it's look, I understand you want that. Having that is really important, but why don't we talk about this? That acknowledges somebody's concern and validates their thought, which is what people want when they throw out a want. But as you get into the why, that want will either go back to a want or it will become a need, and you'll be able to figure it out from there. So Paul's got a question here about getting past the fifth layer. I'll try and type and talk. So getting past that fifth layer of annoyance is difficult, because you need to understand why they're annoyed. And sometimes when you get to that level, if they are still really frustrated and agitated, that's a good time to just call them out on it. Just say, hey, sounds like I'm touching a nerve here, and I'm not trying to. What else can you tell me? Give them the opportunity to vent. If they're getting annoyed or they're not understanding why you're asking the questions, sometimes those whys don't connect mentally as to why you're asking them. So taking a moment to kind of pull the audience and say, hey, this looks like it's really causing some issues here. What else can you tell me about it? Or why is it making you feel this way? Or why do you feel like, and the hardest part of this whole scenario is truly coming at it from an empathetic kind of tone. You're probably going to touch some points that people aren't necessarily comfortable with, but being hey, I'm here to help you. I'm here to understand, and not getting your own personal emotions tied into it. When somebody is angry at you, it's really easy to get angry back at them, but stopping and slowing down is a huge tool, especially when you get to that fifth layer of understanding. Hey, help me understand why this is really irritating you. And people will understand, hey, all right, maybe I'm getting a little angry here or something like that. This is a much better deal. But it's something where coming at it from a non-confrontational, safe point of voice is huge. So it's been fun that way. Yeah, cool. So Miranda's got a client that has the same kind of thing. They're trying to figure out the want versus the need. And it's tough because a client will see a want and think it's a need. So that's where getting into that. Hey, you know what? We'll put that in version 2. It tables that thought, that want for a bit, and then allows them to focus on this is what we need now, and then we can add this later. A V2, V3, V17, whatever is a great way to acknowledge their desire for a want, and honestly moves it off the plate for the time being. But it also means that you're going to have to come back to it. So if your business model is such where you're in, you build something and you're done, a V2 sometimes can be a scary proposition because it means they have to rehire you. That's the other part of it. So Miranda put in their want will cost them thousands over their budget, which is the biggest problem you run into, right? And that's something we're telling them that, saying, look, here's what I'm building that is a need that fits your budget. Your want is going to put you $10,000 over that budget. If you want that, I will build that for you, but you need to pay me for that. And a lot of people will go, well, it's not that important. It's not that, hey, let's, that puts them in a squirm. And you got to be, have a good rapport. But if you've been doing a good feedback loop with back and forth with your people that are in the mix, you can have that conversation and you still have the wiggle room to get out of it if it goes horribly wrong. So a lot of it is being able to pivot, and that's difficult. So, well, cool. Well, I'm 2 minutes over time. I know Tony will, show me the money. Yeah. Hey, we at CAN, we joke around. We're mercenaries. If you want to pay us to do something, we'll build it. Which is funny because as the sales guy for CAN, we'll have conversations and Nate Watson, who's the president of CAN, will say, yeah, we'll do that for 100,000. I'm like, nope, start at 500,000, work down. So I'm always trying to work the negotiations backwards, and it's mostly as a joke, but people will pay what it's worth, which is interesting because the more they can see a want and a need, and the more that the needs bleed into wants, the more that project may be worth to somebody. So depending on the context, sometimes letting that conversation roll and letting it go to a V2, V3 will mean more long-term work between you and that client because they're vested in the development of that solution. They become a partner more than a client, and they see you as part of their team, which is huge because it builds for future relationships, referrals, and future projects. So super awesome stuff. Cool. Well, I'm glad everybody can make it. I hope you guys enjoy the format this year. HDC, a little different. I'm going to be back in the CAN ODSA booth, lovely booth, like my Vanna White skills. We're going to be doing kind of a live podcast all day. So if you've got other questions or anything like that, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, you can check out Gordon Summers, who's our lead data scientist, who's got a session coming up here at 11 with how to design AI that is not racist. So he's got some interesting points there, but we want to make sure that, again, that's coming. That conversation will come from a safe place, and it will come from somebody who is on the right side of that with making that not a problem for us down the line. So I appreciate everybody coming in. I'm going to jump off here and get back to our booth and let this kind of free up. But if you have any questions or comments, feel free to hit me up, reach out to me, whatever. And thank you, AIM, for hosting HDC again. Appreciate it.